So don't forget, tomorrow as part of the big picture, we'll chat to former DA leader. I'm not too sure whether he likes to be introduced like that anymore. Musi Maimane. Looking forward to that conversation. Really about does your vote count and where does that fit in? And then Wednesday being April 27th, Freedom Day, we'll get a whole lot of young South Africans to reflect on, on that phrase, freedom in my lifetime. And I'm really looking forward to that particular conversation, right? Let's, however, pick up on the Champion South Africa feature. We speak to people and we find out how they champion South Africa. So my guest today, Catherine Constantinides, she tweets under the handle Change Agent SA. In many ways, that handle reflects all the things that she does. So Catherine, good chatting to you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Great to chat to you.
Absolutely. So firstly, by the way, just I know you as coming from a Greek heritage. You celebrated the Greek Orthodox Easter, which ended last night, yesterday, and then maybe today as well, this morning being Easter Monday.
Yes, correct. I'm Orthodox Christian, and we follow a different calendar. So we follow the lunar calendar, and so our Easter is not the same as the Easter that is followed, that was celebrated a week ago. And so after 40 days of fasting, we broke our fast yesterday, and it's been a really beautiful 24 hours.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's good to understand different cultures and how we all reflect within those cultures and religions there, yes, right? Yes. Let's, however, talk about you, and here's the open question to you. How do you champion South Africa, Catherine?
Ashraf, thank you for the question. I think the important thing to understand is that each and every single one of us live in a country where we have such a powerful constitution. That constitution is not only one that has all of our rights, but our responsibilities as well. And I don't think often enough we focus in on the responsibilities we have to be active and engaged citizens. Each and every one of us has the ability and the power to really champion South Africa every single day from where we are. And I think that coming from a home where a life of service was very much the value system that we grew up with, it's important for us to understand that championing South Africa is a daily importance. And so through the work that I do, I'm privileged to be able to be a part of building our country on a daily basis. And that really stems from the grassroots work I do on the ground, being on the ground and understanding the challenges that are faced in the spaces that I work. That for me is my pride and joy. And that is something that I believe champions building a great South Africa.
Okay, wonderful for that. Perhaps a good chance to ask you about the work you do, because I have a sense that you do so many things. I battle to keep up. So what is it that you do?
Well, excuse me. I think that my title is such, and people would kind of box me into the space and framework of being a social justice activist, a humanitarian, and a climate activist as well. My work in the environmental and sustainability space has been something that has been so much a part of my work since I was a young girl. So has social justice, and really championing causes and being a voice for the voiceless across many sectors of injustice. And so much of my work addresses some kind of an injustice and human rights issue. At the moment, coming out of COVID and having been extensively involved in feeding people during COVID over the period of the last 2 years, the reality is that we come out of the COVID period, and unfortunately, hunger does not stop. Poverty does not end. But what we have seen is that the extent of poverty and the extent of hunger in our country is unprecedented. And so over the last 2 years, I spent a lot of my time, because my formal work as such, I was unable to work, but I was able to spend the time that I did have working really on the ground with communities, where I was able to focus in on how do we make sure that we're feeding people, because there's actually a humanitarian crisis in our country that we don't talk of. It's a crisis that we don't understand. And being able to be on the ground over the last couple of 2 years and more, I've been feeding communities and specifically children at schools. But a lot of my work, I do sustainability work. I do a lot of work around building brands and their idea of sustainability, their understanding of corporate social responsibility, and trying to really harness the the wealth of experience I've had in many different communities across our country and continent, and trying to use that to really share this understanding and ability that I have to connect with communities and find a solution, trying to share that from a corporate perspective as well.
And just on the issue of environmental change and sustainability around that, I mean, I'm aware of the point that yourself, together with your sister Alabella, in fact, started Miss Earth, and therefore sort of owns the South African chapter of Miss Earth. I mean, that goes back a while, right? But perhaps a good chance to ask you about your skill set. I mean, when you reflect on what are the skills that you have that gives you that edge that puts you into the type of positions that you are in right now?
Yes, so Ella and I have run the Miss Earth South Africa Leadership Program for just over 15 years. And across those 15 years, I've been able to really harness the ability to how do we empower women on the ground in communities across South Africa to really have the ability to impact change. And using the vehicle of the Miss Earth, we've been able to drive environmental issues across the country, looking at water, waste management, and looking at the rather unsexy topics that people don't talk about, but they're fundamental to every single one of us. We saw these floods in Durban that happened just over 10 days ago. The impacts of those floods are far worse because of climate change. And climate change is something we don't always connect ourselves to because we're not environmentalists. However, we're all impacted by a changing climate. Each and every one of us drinks tea or coffee. And that tea and coffee comes from a farmer that is trying to sustain themselves with a changing climate, with less access to clean, safe drinking water that they're able to use on their crops, et cetera, et cetera. But using all that knowledge and all of that we've been able to collect from an experience perspective over the years, I've worked across the continent in different communities. And I think my ability to not only communicate, but understand and be on the ground with people who are living in a rural village somewhere in the middle of northern Ethiopia in Lalibela, right down to being able to understand those affected members of the Langa community that were impacted by the recent fires, that ability to really connect with people on the ground from all walks of life, and then turn that into conversations that need to be had with stakeholders that through years of work and the ability to impact change, we're able to impact or connect into a network that we have built where solutions can be sought, but they can also be implemented.
And I think that's the key part, the networks that provide the solutions, right? Would you say now, service to, it's like a broad definition, the service to humanity is really your full-time job in its various iterations?
100%. I think I grew up in a home where service to humanity was how I thought that people all lived. Because growing up, my father we would spend weekends playing bingo with old age homes and people in different communities. Our Easter or Christmas was spent cooking and taking that food to different communities and sharing that meal with them. I thought that that's how everybody lived, because even when we had very little, on the coldest nights through winter, we would drive through the CBD and Hillbrow and we would hand out hundreds of loaves of bread. Even when we didn't always have enough food, I always saw my parents giving and living a life that was a life of service to others. And I honestly grew up thinking that's how everybody lived and that's how everybody continued with their lives. And only when I was much older did I realize not everybody has that same value set or understanding or outlook on life, but that was ingrained in who we are as people, and our moral compass and foundation and very fabric of who we are is certainly service to humanity.
Yeah. What and South Africa is richer for your work and obviously your parents influencing that work a long time ago, and therefore, I mean, I was really comfortable talking to you about you and how you champion South Africa, because I know you do that and you do that so well. Just the last two things before I let you go. How do you, when you reflect on yourself, I mean, like, you have a financial balance sheet, but do you have a balance sheet in terms of input and impact that you make, and how do you measure that?
I think it's really important to always be in touch with what you're trying to achieve, the why of every single thing we do, be it putting in a community food garden, teaching people how to test their own water, be it feeding children at a school, creating an education program that has some kind of a positive impact, all these different kinds of things. You need to ask why you're doing it. Anything I get involved with, I work extensively on the issue of Western Sahara. What I do and every trip I make or every appearance at the United Nations on behalf of the people of Western Sahara, everything needs to have an outcome or an understanding as to why we're doing it. Life is very precious and it's very short. And what we don't always realize is that your life can change in seconds and everything can be completely different. You need to be answerable to every decision you make, where you spend your time, why you spend your time in that manner, and you need to understand what you're trying to achieve. If you don't understand why you're doing something or why you have said yes to this interview, for example, with Ashraf Garda on Monday morning, what is it that you want the outcome of everything you do to be? Sometimes we walk that journey and we may not achieve that goal, but if we have that goal in mind and we know what we are wanting to achieve and why we're doing it, more often than not, you are able to then quantify, were we able to make that impact? Were we able to achieve the goal we set out? And if we didn't, why? And what can we do better the next time? How do we rally different resources or different stakeholders and partners? Whatever it might be, you can quantify what you're doing if you understand what you're trying to achieve. Just going to feed a community for the sake of feeding them, not understanding the realities on the ground, where you're feeding, why you're feeding them. If you don't have a why, it's very difficult to quantify anything.
Yeah.
But we have been able to really focus in on what we're trying to achieve, the impact that we do have, and the reality around that impact, and how we scale that impact is always for us very important. We are a small team of people. Sometimes I go into communities and I'm only one person, but I know what it is I'm trying to achieve or what I'm trying to do.
I think we just lost Catherine for a second. Okay, if we have, I think we've got the gist of what was said. And here's the thing regarding Catherine Constantinides. I mean, what she just said is not just a classic example of how she champions South Africa, but I think it's also a masterclass in how one should champion oneself. So picking up on many of the other conversations, even including in Ramadan, how do you champion yourself and obviously your causes, and I think she's done just that. So that's Catherine Constantinides, right? Now, by the way, picking up on changing society, riba is a terrible sin and easily move your business, therefore, or personal insurance to Amana IFS. Call 0861 786 393 and leave riba for good.